And Brian, I don't know about you, but I'm stationed right now on the Yahoo Finance trending ticker page. Bunch of things moving on there. Really, as nobody would be surprised, it is defense stocks. We're talking Northrop Grumman here. We're talking Lockheed Martin. You even flagged L3 Harris here this morning. All three, really all of these defense stocks are getting a nice boost after Germany said over the weekend it wants to increase its budgets, its defense budget, to reach 2% of GDP. And I'm just scrolling a note out of Jefferies right now. They're noting that non-U.S. NATO members must increase their defense budgets by 25% if they want to reach Germany's new target of 2%. So the market is looking at this as a potential big boost for some of these global multinational defense companies.
Yeah, and what's been really interesting is that it's not like it's just last Friday, for example, that we saw the big bump. I mean, I think markets had known that these defense stocks were maybe going to be a play that they liked in the initial first days of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I mean, even if you just rewind to last week on the 24th, you actually saw a huge bump in the stocks of, for example, Northrop Grumman, NOC, L3 Harris, LHX. Raytheon notably got a decline, but I think that also coincided with the earnings that they had reported. And there was a headline that said they may not have been able to deliver the 70 engines that they had originally been signed for to Airbus because of some shortages in their supply chain. So actually the stock went down, at least for Raytheon, during that time. But of course, broadly speaking, it's bounced back anyway. And over just the last, let's say, 3-day period, each of these stocks are up over 5%. So that's kind of not a surprise, I guess, to say that this is a good play, I guess, for equities investors that are looking at the volatility and seeing where can I reallocate here.
Mr. Market always knows, Brian Cheung. It always knows, even when it doesn't know. Also, too, switching from defense to oil, seeing a lot of these stocks. Of course, we mentioned BP at the top of the show, divesting its stake in Russian oil and natural gas giant Rosneft. Unclear who will be stepping in to buy that almost 20% stake. But still, you're seeing oil prices here up in the early going, seeing shares of ExxonMobil catching a bit here as the Yahoo Finance trending ticker page breaks down. It is amazing, Brian, how strategist after strategist, at least to me, continues to downplay the risk to the global economy from higher oil prices. I just don't sense a lot of folks are concerned. They really should be.
Well, they downplay it, but I think what's interesting is that it's within the narrative of, well, there were already secular trends at play, irrespective of the Russia and Ukraine crisis, that were going to push oil prices higher anyway. I mean, you had Dan Dicker come on our show, I believe it was the end of last week, saying, even if there were no Russia-Ukraine situation, I still would have expected a barrel of oil to be over $100. So I think the question now is, how do the sanctions that have been put in place already further exacerbate perhaps what we're seeing in oil prices? Because we have to remember, the sanctions don't mean that the oil price is going to spike because of a shortage today or even tomorrow. It's going to take some time for some of that to bleed through the system. And if it is indeed the case that Russia will very quickly be cut off from the global supply chain when it comes to at least their oil and gas supply, maybe it's going to take some days or maybe even weeks to see the full impact of that.
Yeah, indeed. And we're coming up against the opening bell here. Markets look like they could open under a good bit of pressure. At one point last night, the Dow futures were down more than 500 here, but we're seeing some of those losses get pared back here. And here we have that opening bell on Wall Street. There we had, there's the new New York City Mayor, Eric Adams, ringing that opening bell down at the New York Stock Exchange. Again, Eric Adams there kicking the session off. And Brian, we briefly touched upon this with Aaron Brown over at PIMCO moments ago, but we're getting comments later this week from Fed Chief Jerome Powell. Market's going to have to digest that stuff too.
Oh, yeah. Well, look, they're going to keep me plenty busy this week. We have 2 back-to-back days of testimony from Jerome Powell. He's going to be speaking to the House Financial Services Committee 10 a.m. on Wednesday, and then again in the Senate Banking Committee on 10 a.m. on Thursday. Going to be very interesting to see what he has to say there. It'll be his first time speaking since the Russia-Ukraine situation really flared up, and it will be the last time that we hear from him before the Federal Reserve and all of their officials go into their traditional blackout period beginning on Saturday in the 9-day period leading up to the Fed's next meeting on March 16. So we'll be holding on to his words very closely. And of course, there's a dashboard of other Fed speakers we're expecting to hear from later this week as well, with Raphael Bostic from the Atlanta Fed expected to speak today. It'll be interesting to see not only how they respond to the Russia-Ukraine situation, but whether or not they have any sort of predictions ahead of that employment report on Friday, and then, of course, another CPI read next week.